quorum. So we're gonna kind of record the session. Tonight, we're gonna be talking about heart trouble, heart disease. And Scott, do you have anything you want to share before we continue on or whatever?
No, I figured as far as you can do a couple of the introduction kind of videos before I'll show the part of the Esselstyn lecture. But yeah, everyone probably knows from these classes, it's the #1 killer, cardiovascular disease that encompasses coronary artery disease and stroke. So as we've talked about before, it's cardiovascular disease is in the heart, it's a heart attack. In the brain, it's a stroke. Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that contribute to that. In the kidneys, it's kidney disease. In the feet, it's peripheral vascular disease. And so it's kind of like the same disease, but in different parts of the body, and it has different effects. But if you just look at heart disease itself, that's the #1 killer since the Spanish flu in 1918. It's been the #1 killer every year ever since. So we're doing something wrong when we're doing all these bypasses and stents and taking statins and all these things. We're just kind of treating the symptoms rather than the cause, and that's the problem. So we need to do something different, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight.
So are there any new members that have signed on for the first time, or if there are, or for the second time, and you want to introduce and let us know how you found out about the classes? We're always interested in that. We want to welcome you, and we won't ask you any questions that you're afraid to answer, but don't be afraid or shy. Speak up. We like to hear how you found out about the classes, what you might hope to gain from them.
We're new, Ann and Judd, and we heard about your organization from our daughter and JJBN. And so we're very interested in what you have to say, and we're excited about going on the walk.
Great. Well, welcome to both. Thank you. And we're very happy to have you. And, stick with a couple of the classes. Your daughter probably had some method to her madness of inviting you to a class like this.
And just in case you didn't recognize, that's Eugene Veggie's JJ.
That's Eugene Veggie's JJ. Yeah. And you're her parents? Yeah, well, welcome. JJ taught me how to make falafel way back a few months ago, and I loved it. I prepared a recipe at home, and we really love what she's doing. So kudos to her, and we're thrilled to have you. Anybody else who is new? Pam, if you unmute your microphone, we can hear what you're saying. So, and start over again. I know it's, not like second nature, this thing, but there's a little microphone at the bottom.
I got it. There we go.
There you go.
Now can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you, Pam.
Okay, great. Pam Dickey, and I was talking to my doctor and looking for some questions. They recommended I go on a plant-based diet, and the more I searched and the more I looked, the more confused I got. And yes. So then they gave me your website. So I'm very excited to learn all about this.
Well, welcome. And there is a lot of confusing information out there, and that's what we're attempting to clear up. We like to show you the science, and then you make a decision as to what you choose to do for your life. Some of the other members in this group can be support. They can answer some of the questions that may come up for you. And we even have a med student who will help coach you a little bit for free if you're interested in doing that. You find yourself get stuck or whatever it is. It's Lisa Chick. She just showed up online here, and she'll leave her information or tell us about her. So.
Okay.
Hi.
Great.
Yes. I'm just cooking dinner right now, but I will leave my information in the chat and you're welcome to contact me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So that helps train our young doctors so that they can, spread pass the word to even more people, and it helps the people who attend these classes to get support. And the cost is right; it's nothing. Yeah. So welcome. It really does my heart good when I hear you say a doctor referred me to these classes. Because when we first started these classes way back when, it was tough to get any doctor to refer anyone to classes on nutrition and food as medicine, lifestyle medicine. That was about, I don't know, 8, 9 years ago. And now there are so many people who are being referred by their providers, whether it's doctor, physician assistant, nurse practitioner, whatever. And so we're thrilled about that. Anybody else? I think that probably does it for new faces. So we want to get started. And the number one killer, what is it in the United States of America? If you were going to pick one thing that was going to do you in, I see a heart there by Jerry. Yeah, heart disease, number one killer. It kills more people than COVID, not by a lot, as it turns out. There have been about 1 million people killed by COVID over the last couple of years, but actually there's been 1,200,000, 1,300,000 people killed by heart disease in our country. So it is the number one killer. Now, there is another illness that's kind of creeping up behind it, and maybe some areas of the country may be overtaking heart disease, and that's cancer. And as it turns out, the etiology behind or the root cause of heart disease, many cancers, diabetes, obesity is what we used to think is the genes. We now know about 80% is due to our lifestyle choices. And those are the lifestyle choices we have are what we eat, how we move throughout the day, the chemicals we choose, like smoking or drinking, and then how we deal with stress. And that includes whether we're able to get enough sleep, because we're not ruminating about what went on in the day or who we're angry or ticked off with. And Dean Ornish says we need to love more and hate less, or whatever, I think. And the other is our social contacts. And of course, COVID has disrupted that quite a bit, but that's all related to the stress. So how we deal with stress can really influence our health. Well, tonight we're going to be talking specifically about heart disease, but whatever you learn tonight about heart disease, it will roll over into most any other illness that you have in your life. And so you say, so what makes you believe that you can do anything to keep people from getting heart disease? Because we used to believe everything was related to genetics. Well, there's been 2 studies in the world literature that demonstrate reversal of heart disease. They take a group of people, they change their diet, or they change their diet, they have them exercise, they have them learn to meditate or do yoga to reduce the stress. They put them in group therapy to improve their social contacts and love more and hate less. That's the study by Dean Ornish in California 30 years ago, over 30 years, which demonstrated you could actually unclog the coronary arteries. You take an angiogram before they get in the study and you see the narrowed coronary arteries. And then you put them on a plant-based diet with doing all these other activities, and what happens? After 1 to 3 years, you see 86% of the people in that study showed visible opening up of the arteries. That's just with lifestyle changes. So if any of you are worried about heart disease, you may be interested in learning more about how you could actually do this. That's how I got started. I watched a program by Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and it was titled The Last Heart Attack. And in this program, he reviewed a study, not Ornish's study, but a study at the Cleveland Clinic where Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn took a group of patients and he said, you know, Dr. Ornish, he took over people's lives. You know, he had them eating different, he had them exercising, he put them in yoga, meditation, group therapy, like they had to change their whole life. And he said, what if you just changed the food? Forget the other things. So he took a group of people, 5 of whom in this group were told they weren't going to live another out the year. They kept having a heart attack or bypass or stent. And so took these people, put them on a whole plant food diet. He saw them every 2 weeks so he could keep them on track, because as many of you have recognized, this is not something that is going to be welcomed by your family and friends and your social group. They're going to think that you either have a brain tumor, or that you're going through a midlife crisis, or that you're severely depressed about something. Why would you want to give up foods that are well known to be what we eat for something that is just plants? I mean, that hardly makes sense to those of us growing up in our culture, because where do you get your protein? Where do you get your calcium? If you don't eat, you drink cow's milk, and if you don't eat meat, where are you going to get these things? That's what we've grown up to believe, the myths we've lived under. Well, anyway, Caldwell Esselstyn put these people on a whole plant-based diet, counseled them, and at the end of 12 years, I think they were all alive except for one guy who said, oh, not only alive, no further heart attack, bypass, or stents, by the way. Healthy now. One guy, however, after 6 years said, I'm feeling so good, I'm going to go back and eat how I wanted to eat, how I used to. And he wound up with a bypass after starting the standard American diet again. So, but he got back on Esselstyn's diet and he lived past those 12 years, and many of them lived past 20 years. But bottom line is he did angiograms, and about 36% of those people showed visible opening up of the arteries. So food alone will work for some people, but if you go a step further and do food and exercise and stress management, you can, reverse your heart disease even more quickly. Well, my wife asked me, do you think we should do this? And I really did not want to do this at all. And yeah, I didn't want to lose my wife. And why was I worried about losing my wife? For those of you who are new and haven't heard the story, my wife's dad died at age 41 of his first heart attack. My wife's mother had had a cardiac bypass. My wife's brother had had his bypass, and she was older than both her mother and her brother. She was next in line. And I had decided, do I want to lose my wife to heart disease, or do I want to try to save her through this diet? I didn't believe it would work. I thought it might work for some people, but it wasn't for us. But I thought I could do this for a month, and at the end of the month, if she was feeling good, she'd keep doing it, and I'd go back and eat how I wanted to eat. Well, in 1 month, my weight came down 10 pounds, no extra exercise. My weight came, I was feeling great. never hungry for a day. And my cholesterol level dropped from 240 down to 148. Several months later, it went to 135. Just food, no medicine, and I was hooked. Now, it's been almost 10 years since we saw his program. Maybe it's slightly over 10 now. And my wife has no evidence of heart disease. I'm 73, she's 73, 72, going to be 73. And I'm very grateful that we made the change. And that's one of the reasons I'm standing here talking to you. I'm going to share my next video with you. And then Scott has some video to share with you also. We're both pretty passionate about this. We fight for the time to who gets to present what, because we both like to do this so much, and we get so much inspiration from those of you who, you know, make the decision to really do something different with your life. And that different thing is to start making healthy lifestyle choices. So I'm going to share the screen with you, and then I'm going to go to the first video. It's by Dr. Greger, and it's how not to die from heart disease. I've kind of given you a spoiler alert about it, but he's going to give you some more facts in a way that I think you'll like. I just need to find it on here, and I'm getting closer every moment in time. So take a look at your microphones and try to mute them, because that'll keep the sound down for all the rest of the people. Because I hear some noise in the background and I'm not sure who that is, but someone will figure that out. And we're going to learn how not to die right now from heart disease.
The most likely reason most of our loved ones will die is heart disease. It's still up to each of us to make our own decisions as to what to eat and how to live, but we should make these choices consciously, educating ourselves about the predictable consequences of our actions. Atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, begins in childhood. By age 10, the arteries of nearly all kids raised on the standard American diet already have fatty streaks, the first stage of the disease. Then, the plaques start forming in our 20s, get worse in our 30s, and then can start killing us off. In our heart, it's called a heart attack. In our brain, it can manifest as a stroke. So if there's anyone watching this older than age 10, then the choice isn't whether or not to eat healthy to prevent heart disease, it's whether or not you want to reverse the heart disease you likely already have. Is that even possible? When researchers took people with heart disease and put them on the kind of plant-based diet followed by populations that did not get epidemic heart disease, their hope was that it might slow the disease process down, maybe even stop it. But instead, something miraculous happened. The disease started to reverse, to get better. As soon as patients stopped eating artery-clogging diets, their bodies were able to start dissolving some of the plaque away, opening up arteries without drugs, without surgery, suggesting their bodies wanted to heal all along, but were just never given the chance. That improvement in blood flow to the heart muscle itself on the left was after just 3 weeks eating healthy. Let me share with you what's been called the best-kept secret in medicine. The best-kept secret in medicine is that sometimes, given the right conditions, the body can heal itself. You know, if you whack your shin really hard on a coffee table, you can get all red, hot, painful, swollen, inflamed, but will heal naturally if you just stand back and let your body work its magic. But what if you kept whacking your shin in the same place day after day? In fact, 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It never healed. You'd go to your doctor and be like, oh, my shin hurts. The doctor would be like, no problem. Whip out their pad, write your prescription for painkillers. You're still whacking your shin 3 times a day. Oh, it still really hurts like heck, but oh, it feels so much better with those pain pills on board. Thank heavens for modern medicine. It's like when people take nitroglycerin for crushing chest pain. Tremendous relief, but you're not doing anything to treat the underlying cause. Our body wants to come back to health if we let it, but if we keep re-damaging ourselves 3 times a day, we may never heal. One of the most amazing things I learned in all my medical training was that within about 15 years of stopping smoking, your lung cancer risk approaches that of a lifelong non-smoker. Isn't that amazing? Like your lungs can clear out all that tar, and eventually it's almost as if you never started smoking at all. And every morning of our smoking life, that healing process started to wham, our first cigarette of the day, re-injuring our lungs with every puff, just like we can re-injure our arteries with every bite, when all we had to do all along, the miracle cure, is just stand back, get out of the way, stop re-damaging ourselves, and let our body's natural healing processes bring us back towards health. The human body is a self-healing machine. Sure, you could choose moderation, hit yourself with a smaller hammer, but why beat yourself up at all? I don't tell my smoking patients to cut down to half pack a day. I tell them to quit. Sure, half pack is better than 2 packs a day, but we should try to only put healthy things in our mouths. We've known about this for decades. American Heart Journal, 1977, cases like Mr. F.W. here, heart disease so bad couldn't even make it to the mailbox, but started eating healthier, and a few months later he was climbing mountains, no pain. Now, there are these fancy new anti-angina, anti-chest pain drugs out now that cost thousands of dollars a year, but at the highest dose may be able to prolong exercise duration as long as 33.5 seconds. It does not look like those choosing the drug route will be climbing mountains anytime soon. Right? See, plant-based diets aren't just safer and cheaper, they can work better because you're treating the actual cause of the disease.
So I'm going to stop the share for a moment and just make one further comment. There are a lot of diets out there. It's very confusing. You hear everything from the carnivore diet, paleo, keto, grain brain, wheat belly. I mean, there's a slew, and it can cause us to go crazy. You know, everybody's got a good story, but if you look at the science, there are only 2 documented studies in the world literature that actually demonstrate reversal of heart disease. And what are those 2 studies? Mentioned one was Dean Ornish, the other is Caldwell Esselstyn. Only 2 studies in the world literature that have ever demonstrated reversal of heart disease. So it's your choice. If you don't want a heart disease, you could choose to follow what they recommended and chose for their study participants and have some really good outcome. But this is totally up to you. And as you look at you weigh the evidence of keto and paleo and zone and grain brain, ask yourself, did these studies ever demonstrate reversal of heart disease? And if they haven't, you're probably risking your life for the problem of heart disease. Okay, I'm done. Scott, any thoughts, or anybody else in the room?
Yeah, I'll just add that Medicare gets it because Medicare now covers the lifestyle medicine for, it's actually considered, instead of in cardiac rehab, everyone knows about cardiac rehab that insurances cover after you have a heart bypass or a stent. There's actually a new Medicare coverage called intensive cardiac rehab, and that's actually Dean Ornish's program. So it took 16 years to get Medicare to cover it, but the last several years it's covered now. So, and it's only a whole food plant-based diet. So it's Nathan Pritikin's program and Dean Ornish's program, and they're both whole food plant-based. Those are the only ones. So Medicare is not covering keto, paleo, or any other diet because they've seen the science. It's only a whole food plant-based diet has ever been shown to reverse the #1 killer of heart disease. So there's no debate to have about it. It's just, okay, But that's for the number one killer. But there's lots of other benefits. You can reverse a lot of other conditions with the same diet. So yeah.
So go ahead, Dorothea.
What's the difference between this whole food plant-based diet and a vegan diet?
You want to take that, Scott?
Yeah, great question. So a vegan diet, it's more, vegan is more of a, these days, it's more of an ethical term. So it means, so when someone says they're vegan, it implies what they're not eating more than what they are eating. So someone is a vegan, that means they're not eating any animal products. So they're not eating any meat or dairy. So no fish, nothing with a mother or a face is another way to look at it. So that's what, so vegan says what you're not eating, but it doesn't really tell me or anybody what you are eating, because, donuts are vegan, French fries are vegan, junk food, is vegan. So it doesn't mean you're eating healthy if you're eating vegan. So what whole food plant-based diet, if you're following it 100%, that would be a vegan diet if you're following 100% whole food plant-based diet. But what it implies with whole food plant-based is that you're not eating processed food. So you're not eating any animal products and you're not eating any processed foods. Now that's if you're 100%. So if saying a whole food plant-based diet can be fairly on a spectrum. So you could be eating a plant predominant diet, mostly whole food plant-based diet. And so it wouldn't necessarily, if you're saying you're eating a mostly whole food plant-based diet, you could still be eating some animal products and some dairy products, but you would be trying to avoid processed foods too, because it's mostly whole food plant-based. So it's, if you look at the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, who I'm board certified with, and you look at the world literature on a population scale, they advocate for a 90 to 95% whole food plant-based diet. And that's really what the blue zones, the healthiest 5 places on earth that have the longest lived, healthiest populations, they eat 90 to 95% whole food plant-based diet. The caveat and Charlie and I talk about in these classes is we teach you all in this class how to eat 100% whole food plant-based diet, because again, that's the only diet that's ever been shown to reverse the number one killer of heart disease. So we feel like everybody deserves to learn how to eat 100% whole food plant-based diet. But like we say, we're not the police. We're not going to ever judge anybody here. So if you're not interested in going 100%, that's totally fine. That's up to you. But we're going to teach everybody the benefits and how you can follow 100% whole food plant-based diet. So I hope I answered the question about the difference between vegan and whole food plant-based eater. Yes,
thank you.
And I want to add a little bit to what Scott just did, and that's what we teach. He's absolutely right. We are not policemen. We don't give tickets. We don't judge or belittle anyone if they choose to continue to eat however they choose to eat. But if someone comes to me, for example, and says, Charlie, I'm having chest pain. My doctor says I should go in for an angiogram because, I might have blockages. I do my very best to tell them, hey, now's the time to do this 100% and see if you can prevent from having to do a surgery, which likely will not prolong your life, will alleviate your pain, but not likely prolong your life. If you really change what you're eating and do it 100%, as I've been doing for the last 10 years, I know you can do it and you can feel good. You can wind up taking no pills like I'm doing after 10 years at age 73. And you could effectively reverse your heart disease. If you're otherwise healthy and you come and you say, I like to eat some deer meat that my son-in-law goes out and hunts. And I say, hey, you don't have any diabetes, any heart trouble, you don't have any kidney disease that you're trying to reverse. You can eat what you like. I recommend you eat it like a garnish instead of a main meal, but use it as a taste. And the recommendation for doing things 90, 95%, like in the blue zones, remember, these are people who live their life from the time they were an infant to the time they're older. We have been spending most of our life eating a high fat, salt, sugar diet that has started clogging our arteries at the age of 10. So if we think we can get by just like the blue zone people and be just as healthy, we have to give a little thought to the fact that perhaps we have more advanced disease and maybe we should do this more fully for a few years to reverse the disease. That's what my wife and I did. We spent the first 2 full years of being very strict, totally 100% whole food, plant-based. But it's not something you have to do. It's something we chose to do. So this is still your choice. Any other thoughts from anyone or questions? Jerry?
Now's the time, to say, work on it one mouthful at a time.
Very good.
Seriously, the French say 3 bites and you get all you're going to get out of it.
So you
The
bring
rest
up
of
a
it,
good point.
you
Some
know,
people can do this in one fell swoop, where
Yeah.
one day they're eating standard American diet, the next day they throw everything out of their cupboards that's processed and animal-based and processed oils, et cetera. And then the next day they're eating totally plant-based whole foods. That was what my wife and I attempted to do, and we were successful at doing it. But the majority of people don't choose to do that. They choose to gradually, they use up the
Yeah.
chicken that's in their refrigerator, or they do a Monday vegan day, or they do something that transitions themselves and their family.
remember when we did the potluck and everybody brought a dish at the church, the
Yeah.
last one?
That was wonderful.
I mean, everything was wonderful. I mean, it was very inspirational. And I didn't feel the same for about a week. So it was to have a whole meal of plant-based food. Now, this was way back at the beginning, but it was a little difficult.
And the difficulty comes in is we get in certain habits, we're used to doing certain things, and chopping vegetables becomes like a difficult thing for a while because we're not used to doing it. It's like learning to
But
play
Charlie,
a musical instrument or
this was
learning to
just
play
one
tennis.
meal. This was just one meal.
Yeah.
See, but the things I chose evidently had more fiber than we've ever thought.
Oh, I
You
see.
know.
So it gave you a little diarrhea or whatever.
I don't even remember, but it was a week. It was
Yeah.
a week.
Yeah, so some people do have loose stool, sometimes a little diarrhea for the first few weeks. Some people have some increased gas or bloating if they do this 100%.
Why would it hurt?
You're changing your bacteria and they're kind of like warring with each other. Someone
Oh,
recommended. It's like the muskets are going off, they're firing each other, and there's the extra gas and discomfort, distension of your colon that it can occur with the increased fiber.
I bought
But it
spelt
goes
bread
away.
one time. And that gave me a stomach ache, and I threw the rest of it out. Too rough.
Yeah.
It was just too rough,
So people have individual differences, and what works for some may not work for others, and there's no one food that you have to eat or whatever. So we all learn. It's a process. And the reason for coming to the classes, if you have questions, you think things are not going right in your world, to bring it up, take it up with Lisa, take it up with Scott or myself, Scott in an office visit, whatever we do, we try to help you through some of these issues.
You have another video, or you want me to show Esselstyn now?
Why don't you show Esselstyn, and then if we have time, we're going to go on to America's #1 killer, the McDougall's, blood flow thing.
All right. Well, I'll go to the, you can see my screen there.
Yep.
Go, I always do that. Let's see. There we go. Go to the class website, And I have the full Esselstyn lecture on the class website now. So you go, this is the home page, and then click on videos. And if you guys haven't checked out the website recently, I've been adding stuff continuously because Tammy taught me how to download the videos and manage the website myself now. So she designed it, but now for the last couple months, I've been the one adding stuff here. So I add some new resources. Let me show that real quick since
we have time.
Yeah, since that's new. So I have a printable class flyer here. If you wanted to share with friends or family or whatever, you can click that and print that. There's a free plant-based cooking class through Switch. That's a link to it there. I think that's the only thing I've added new here. Let's see. Handouts. I added a new handout. This is, I used to have this at the church. It's what is your why for lifestyle change? So it's just a handout that that kind of gives you some inspiration to kind of remind yourself of why you're making these diet and lifestyle changes. I added that recently. And then on the videos, I added some videos. So I added a couple of the Gregor ones, the philosophy of nutrition facts, how the nutrition facts website or research is a science. These other ones have been here a while. And I added the Forks Over Knives documentary here because it's now on YouTube. So you can just stream it. You can just watch it right here if you click it. And then Dr. Clapper I added recently. And then here's Dr. Esselstyn. And I'm just going to show a 13-minute segment from this, but you can watch the full lecture. And this was actually from Portland, Oregon in 2012. I'm going to go to a certain section of it. So just to give you a setup, so Charlie talked about Dr. Esselstyn, and this is just a small segment from this lecture. And the reason I'm showing you this is just to kind of give you kind of an idea of what's going on inside the artery with heart attacks, and kind of just give you some basic information. It's a little science heavy because he's actually lecturing to medical providers and people at a conference. So there is a lot, there's really good information before this, a lot of good information after this. It is a little science heavy, but this little 13-minute segment gives you a good overview of what's going on in the arteries with heart disease. So let's take a look at this.
And I'll try to work closely with you on this, but we really want to get this right. Obviously on the right here, it's a seriously diseased artery. You're all probably saying when that finally closes off, there's going to be a heart attack. Well, not so. Only about 10% of heart attacks come from something which is this ugly looking. On the other hand, I want you to look at the left, because even those of you in the back of the room will be able to see that which is the absolute guardian and life jacket of our blood vessels. All experts in this will agree to this. That single layer cell lining of our arteries, that magic carpet has a name. It's the endothelium. The endothelium, E-N-D-O-T-H-E-L-I-U-M, the endothelium. Now, the endothelium has some very, very remarkable functions that we're going to talk about in a few moments. But first of all, what seems to go astray with the way we eat in this country is the following. Let's suppose, here we are on the left, you decide you're going to eat a milkshake, a cheeseburger, or some pizza. And what suddenly happens is our cellular elements in our bloodstream begin to get sticky. Your blood is now no longer flowing like Teflon. It's more like Velcro. Your endothelial cells get sticky. Your platelets, your clotting factor, get sticky. Your white cells get sticky, and your bad LDL cholesterol gets sticky. I know you've all been waiting for this. Well, let's do it together. Up here, this is the work of Peter Libby from Harvard. And up here, the blood is flowing, and it's blue. You can see these individual endothelial cells here. Well, we're all going to work together and start here on the left and look up here in the bloodstream. Orange, your LDL cholesterol, which now is sticky, and it crosses through the sticky endothelium. So now in the subendothelial compartment, we have LDL cholesterol, which, as the artist has depicted by making it yellow now, suddenly gets oxidized. Oxidized by these nasty free radicals that we have in our diet. And the subendothelial compartment cannot abide those nasty oxidized LDL particles, so it calls upon our SWAT team, the white cells, which Peter Libby here has painted blue in honor of Yale, right? Okay. So the white cells or the macrophage begins gobbling up like Pac-Man, all these nasty LDL particles, and it gets over here, and suddenly it is now so chocked full of these LDL particles that we in medicine do what we do so often to confuse you. We change the name. It's no longer a macrophage. It's now, well, I call it Darth Vader, but it truly is called the foam cell. Now, what is so nasty about the foam cell? The foam cell now is an absolute cauldron. It's a cauldron of oxidative inflammation, hydroxy radicals, hydrogen peroxide. And what happens is the foam cell manufactures these nasty, nasty chemical substances we call metalloproteinases. It's not on the test. Elastase, collagenase, metalloproteinases. What do? It's so bad. They thin out this cap over the plaque. It gets thinner and thinner and thinner until here, it's so thin that the sheer force of blood racing over that tears it. And now that seminal event has occurred. You now have ruptured your plaque. Here you are with a 30% plaque, which probably many of you in the audience have today. Completely innocuous, not a problem. Because 30% blockage is not going to give you any symptoms. You have to be over 75% blocked before you get symptoms. But this now, with the rupture, there's extravasation or the spillage out of plaque content into the flowing blood, which activates our clotting factors, platelets. Suddenly, we now start forming this clot over this rupture. And the clot is in and of itself self-propagating. So suddenly, bingo, here we are. Now, that artery, in a matter of minutes, is totally blocked. And all that downstream heart muscle is been deprived of oxygen and nutrients. It starts to die. That's the heart attack. The classic that you all are familiar with, perhaps, that beloved TV commentator on Sunday morning, Meet the Press, Tim Russert, working a Saturday afternoon in his office for his Sunday program, ruptured his plaque, sadly, had a fatal cardiac arrhythmia from which the EMTs could not resuscitate him. So, but you know, the exciting thing about this nasty cascade that you see here, there is good news. And that is, all I have to do is to convince you that if you simply change your internal biochemistry, doesn't take a great deal, but it's enough. When you stop injuring that inner layer, that guardian, that life jacket of your blood vessels, you stop injuring the endothelium, you raise that magic molecule that it manufactures, and what happens is you can never rupture your plaque. I'm going to show you today how you strengthen the cap over the plaque. That's how you make yourself heart attack proof. And guess what? There's no shot, there's no pill, there's no procedure, there's no operation. We're going to talk about 4 defense mechanisms that all of you have. 4 natural defense mechanisms today that are not being treated with standard cardiovascular medicine. And let me just say at the outset here, I have nothing but the greatest admiration and respect and reverence for the fund of knowledge of my cardiovascular colleagues. But we've been at this same deal, treating heart disease now for 60 years. And it's getting a little bit old because it doesn't seem to work. None of it is treating the cause. None of the drugs, none of the imaging, none of the procedures, and none of the operations are treating the causation of the disease. And Thomas Edison said that dissent is essential for progress. So let's have a little constructive dissent. All right. Now, this for years was a cartoon I had in my presentation. Halfway through his hearty man breakfast, Dwayne felt several of his small arteries slamming shut. No longer a cartoon. Here, forget the x-ray. Just focus on this artery that's just half filled with a plaque and half still open. We used to think of these wonderful endothelial cells up until 1980 as cute little bricks that were lining these wonderful pipes. And then what happened was Dr. Furchtgott in Brooklyn, doing experiments with the rat aorta, the largest aorta in the rat, found that when he didn't injure the endothelial cells with a spiral cut and immersed it in saline, the artery dilated. So now the race was on globally. What was this factor that Furchtgott had discovered? And he labeled it the EDRF, the endothelial-derived relaxation factor. Thank heavens, that term was only around for 8 years. Because at the end of 8 years, Dr. Furchtgott, Dr. Murad, Dr. Luignaro, 1988, discovered it was a gas, nitric oxide, which we all make. And it has absolutely some wonderful properties. One, a wonderful level of nitric oxide keeps your blood flowing smoothly, like Teflon, rather than Velcro. Number two, nitric oxide is the strongest dilator of blood vessels in the body. You climb stairs, the arteries to your heart dilate. The arteries to your legs dilate. Nitric oxide. Nitric oxide will also prevent inflammation from forming in the wall of your artery, keep you from getting arteries that are stiff, keep you from getting high blood pressure, hypertension. Number four, pretty important, nitric oxide in plentiful amounts protects you from ever developing blockages or plaque. Number five, nitric oxide will prevent migration of smooth muscle from the wall of the artery from growing into the plaque. Number six, nitric oxide may destroy Darth Vader, the foam cell. So there is so much power in that. So I want to show you how to maximize the amount of nitric oxide that is produced. Now, you're probably sitting there saying, gosh, I really wonder what my level of nitric oxide is. Well, it's still a little bit of a research tool, but here's how they do it. First, you take an ultrasound probe, place it over your brachial artery, right? And there on the screen, there's the diameter of your brachial artery. For 5 minutes, then you'll have a blood pressure cuff encircle your upper arm, inflated above systolic blood pressure for 5 minutes. Now, I've had that done. It's not exactly habit forming, but then you release the cuff and immediately take the ultrasound probe, measure the new diameter of the brachial artery, and in the normal individual, it'll be 30% greater because of that time that the cuff was elevated. The next thing that happened that was wonderful was Dr. Robert Vogel, who was chairman of cardiology at University of Maryland, took a group of healthy young subjects to a certain restaurant, which is characterized by arches, which are golden. The half that had the Corn Flakes, brachial artery tourniquet test, boop, normal. The half that had the hash browns and sausages within 120 minutes. Those healthy young subjects, after that meal, could not dilate the artery 120 minutes. That single meal had so savaged, had so imperiled, had so injured the capacity of the endothelial cell to make nitric oxide, they couldn't dilate. But as they followed them a number of hours later on into the early evening, they began to recover. But you and I know, the next morning for breakfast, oh, scrambled eggs and bacon. Lunch, How about some white bread with cold cuts and mayonnaise? Supper time, baked potato with sour cream. Lamb chops, vegetables soaked in butter, ranch dressing on a salad, and ice cream for dessert. Here in America, we just take those lovely little old endothelial cells, morning, noon, and night. We just pound them and we injure them. And then we graduate from high school with coronary disease. Okay, isn't it nice to get it all straight? All right, looking at some different diets. Here's flow-mediated dilatation, same thing as the brachial tourniquet test and sense. The worst diet for that, Atkins. Next worst, South Beach. There's the champ, plant-based. All right, let's look at something else.
All right. You can watch the rest of that. The first 7 minutes you missed, and then there's still another 45 minutes you can watch on your own. But before open up any questions to that, one thing I like to add to that is you might have picked up from that how he had said earlier on that only 10% of heart attacks occur when a really nasty clogged artery that's maybe say 75, 80, 90% clogged finally clogs 100% and then you get a heart attack. The reason it's only like 10% of the time is because what we tend to do when that plaque that it probably took a long time, like years, maybe even decades, for that artery to go from maybe 10 or 20% clogged to 90 to 95 to 100% clogged. And what the magic of our body does, and in most cases what happens is, if you think of that artery as I-5, the freeway, what happens is our body, because there's been so many years of lack or low blood flow that's not optimal, what our body does is it grows blood vessels around that clogging artery. And so it's kind of like taking little branched side roads around the car accident, right? The blockage in the freeway. And so it's called collateral blood flow, collateral circulation. So if that finally blocks off, you still have some other blood flow that can go around that blockage. And that's why only 10% of heart attacks occur that way. Where 90% of heart attacks occur is basically that blockage that he showed on the diagram, where it was about maybe 30% blocked or so, because those plaques tend to be younger and softer and more vulnerable to tearing. Remember how he showed it teared and formed a blood clot? So those are the ones that 90% of the time cause the heart attacks. And so I just wanted to kind of explain that, because I know the first times I'd seen some of that information, it was kind of confusing. It's like, well, the one that looked at the nastier one was that's the one that doesn't tend to cause as many problems. And the problem with that is those are the ones, those really nasty looking ones that are 75, 80, 90% clogged. Those are the ones that tend to cause people the angina, chest pain that you always hear about. Someone fails their treadmill test, or they take the nitroglycerin pill because they get chest pain when they start walking around. Those aren't usually the ones that are the dangerous ones. I mean, yeah, those cause symptoms, but those are the ones that most of the time when you fail your treadmill test and you go get a bypass or a stent, those are the ones that they're fixing. And those aren't the ones that tend to cause the problem the majority of the time. And so if somebody ruptures their plaque, like in that example, when it's only 30% blocked, and they rupture their plaque and they're having an actual heart attack, then absolutely they need a stent, they need a bypass. That's life-saving. They need that procedure. But unfortunately, the majority of the stents and bypasses that are done are on people that are not having a heart attack. They just failed their treadmill test and they're having some angina, chest pain, and that's why studies, and I think Charlie will show some videos from Gregor that kind of shows this, that these stents and bypasses, studies show that they don't prolong your life, and they can save your life if you're having a heart attack. So I want to make sure I say that again. But if you're actually using them just because you failed the treadmill test, you're having a little chest pain but not having a heart attack, they haven't been shown to extend your life whatsoever. So it's something that's a bit of an issue. So any questions about that section or that Esselstyn lecture? Anyone have? Oh, you're muted, Charlie.
Sherry, did you have a question? Your hand went up. Go ahead and
I do.
unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you. I was trying to figure out how to unmute. In that video, the doctor pointed out an example or a study that he had done, and where some of the people had corn, I think he said corn flakes for breakfast. And then the other people went to McDonald's and did the hash browns and sausage and so that second group, had the issues. Well, and the first group with the dry cereal did not, but chances are, wouldn't they have poured milk on their cereal? So is that some kind of an issue? I don't know.
I hadn't seen the details of the study, but I believe it was dry cornflakes, as you mentioned. So basically, the cornflakes did not injure the endothelium, and these are normal, healthy young subjects, not
Right.
people with extensive heart disease or anything. But they made nitric oxide, and they were able to dilate their blood vessel, because it's just a marker of whether or not you're producing nitric oxide, which is the dilator and the protector. Whereas if you ate the bacon, the sausage, and pretty much everything, just to give you more information about the nitric oxide, the brachial artery tourniquet test, they've studied hundreds and hundreds of foods, and pretty much everything on the red light list injures the endothelium. So, so pretty much meat, cheese, eggs, dairy, oils, processed foods, any of those things all injure the endothelium. So, including olive oil. So it's like, olive oil on a salad doesn't seem to injure the endothelium because of all the antioxidants and all the healthy components of salad. But if you just give somebody a olive oil plain, just a teaspoon of olive oil, that injures the endothelium. So it's kind of like if you're trying to reverse heart disease, you don't want to have oil. But just as an example, if you ate a salad with a little bit of olive oil on it, that doesn't seem to injure the endothelium because of the protective effect of all the vegetables. But Dr. Esselstyn's, trying to reverse the heart disease, so he's gonna recommend somebody not eat anything that injures the endothelium, and to try to build up that nitric oxide so that you can, basically reduce that plaque and dilate those blood vessels.
Okay, thank you.
Do you all understand how you can increase your nitric oxide in your body naturally? What kind of food you could eat to increase that? Someone just wrote a note, Evie and Doug. How is the nitric oxide increased? Is it solely by foods eaten? So,
so it's on two fronts. So you're protecting the endothelial cells you have so you can make nitric oxide. But then Charlie will talk about it more, and they'll be in the videos. Eating dark green leafy vegetables actually produces nitric oxide. And it's kind of a complicated process with bacteria in the crypts of your tongue, and it gets reduced from nitrate to nitrite, or nitrite to nitrate, and then there's a whole cycle, and then that adds to your nitric oxide pool, and it's a complicated process. But basically just eat lots of green leafy vegetables, whole plant foods, and then avoiding those red light foods will not injure you, so you can also produce your own nitric oxide from the endothelial cells you still have.
So can you remember dark green leafies? If you can't remember that terminology, maybe you could remember broccoli and kale and collards and chard and arugula and spinach. Anything else? Romaine, maybe even, not as much, it's not as dark, but there's a lot of dark green leafies that you could use as variety in your life. And Dr. Esselstyn recommends eating greens, not once a day, not twice or 3 times a day, but 6 times a day, especially if you're trying to reverse heart disease. He does that because he wants you to bathe your arteries in this nitric oxide, and you take a half a handful of dark green leafies and you snack on them regularly throughout the day to keep your arteries running smooth, so to speak. Keep them oiled up properly and allow your body to heal itself back up. Now, for those of you who are, well, let's go on to Nancy.
Oh, just want to mention that also if they load the dozen, the daily dozen, they can keep track of those green leafy vegetables.
That's
And
an
also
excellent
know
idea.
what they are. Yeah.
So for those of you who are new, if you go to the App Store on your phone and you type in a search for Daily Dozen, it will come up as Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen. Download that. It's a free app. You'll be able to see the dozen things that he recommends, and you'll be able to check off on a daily basis if you choose to, or at least you could search each category where it says, I think it starts out with legumes. So if you don't know what a legume is, you click on the little eye and it takes you to the page that has all the different beans and lentils, chickpeas, split peas, and it tells you the serving size, a half a cup. And you learn that from his app. Then you can go to the dark green or the cruciferous vegetables and the green vegetables, and you can see what categories and what the amounts are. It's anywhere from a half a handful or half a cup to a cupful is a serving. If you don't have it on your phone, I encourage you to get it. And for those who speak Spanish, it's in Spanish also. Thank you for reminding us of that, Nancy.
I have a
So-
question. How about leek? Is that a green vegetable too?
I think that would be, I guess the green on top might have some
Yeah,
benefit, but the leek itself, I think, is more under the vegetable category, other vegetable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
Dorothea?
So what are the blue foods and the red foods?
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, it's just from the traffic light handout, green, yellow, and red. So
You want to show them on from the site or whatever?
sure. So Dr. Greger has it on his website too. Talks about the traffic light system. The one I have on the class website is basically based more on the blue zones. Oops, I still got this on here. Let me go up to handouts. Resources, handouts from class. And I have down here towards the bottom, traffic light handout here. So this is just, you can print this out or whatever, or just look at it here. There it is. So this was the percentages from the blue zone. So blue zone people eat 80+% green light, 5 to 10% of their calories come from yellow light, and then about 5 to 10%, or even sometimes less than 5 to 10% red light. So your red light foods, your meat, your cheese, your eggs, your dairy, your oils, processed foods. So all these things here, it's all listed out. And then your green light foods are basically your whole plant foods, fruits, vegetables, starchy vegetables like potatoes, sweet potatoes, squash, corn, and then beans, peas, split peas, chickpeas, lentils, mushrooms, herbs and spices, intact whole grains, which would be like your brown rice, oats, quinoa, bulgur, amaranth, farro, all the ancient grains in their whole intact form. Processed grains would be over here. And then like a whole grain bread would be a yellow light food because it's a little bit processed. So the yellow light foods are a little bit higher in fat, a little bit higher in calories, maybe minimally processed like pasta or whole grain bread. I guess you'd probably put tofu here. Would probably be in the yellow light because it's a little bit processed, whereas edamame, a whole soybean, would be a green light. So it's just kind of a basic way to look at it, is you're trying to eat mostly green light foods, yellow light foods maybe more in moderation, depending if you're trying to lose weight or not, and then or reverse heart disease. But the most important thing is to avoid the red light foods. There's that.
So I'm surprised that my brain's not working, about seeds, that those are orange light.
Yellow light. Just
Yeah,
think about,
yellow.
I just think about like a traffic light. That's why it's called the traffic light handout. So yellow light is still healthy. It's just something you might want to eat more in moderation because they're high in fat or high in calories, you know, or a little bit processed in some cases. So it's, if you're not trying to lose weight, then yellow light foods are fine. So people that are heavy exercisers, athletes, maybe trying to gain a little bit of weight or maintain weight, then they should eat more yellow light foods, because yellow light foods are still healthy foods. You just that's why it's yellow light. So you can get away yellow light. You can get away with running a yellow light now and again, right? You're not going to get away with running red lights very often without getting into an accident, but you want to stick with mostly green lights, right? So it's kind of, think of it that way.
Thank you.
I want to share a chart with you so you can see the calorie density Scott was talking about. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay, so these are the green light foods over here. Non-starchy vegetables are 100 calories a pound. Those are your kale, spinach, broccoli, non-starchy veggies. Fruit is 300 calories a pound. These are the 400 to 600 calories a pound are your starchy vegetables like potatoes, maybe squash, whole grains, legumes, and the complex unrefined carbohydrates like oats, steel cut oats, groats, quinoa, those sorts of things. If you stay on the green side, that will help you with your best health. If you are trying to lose weight, look about the avocados. Even though they're healthy, like Scott said, the purple foods are healthy, but they're very calorie dense and best included in small amounts after weight loss is achieved. So avocados, very high calorie density, not as high as nuts and seeds, nut butters and tahini at 2,800, not nearly as high as all the oils, including olive oil, which are 4,000 calories, but very close to ice cream and bread and cheese and those sugar and those sorts of things.
Wow.
So you still taking a tablespoon of ground flax seed seems reasonable, but for those of you who are trying to lose weight, having minimal amounts of nuts, maybe a quarter cup a day at most. And if you're going to eat nuts, be careful about eating avocados on top of it. If you're not eating nuts, some people choose to stay away from nuts completely. You may want to do a quarter of an avocado. You know, you have different choices to make here. Any other questions? Comments? All right. I want to show you what oils do. Dr. McDougall did a study and he's kind of documented this here about what happens to your arteries when you eat high fat meals, how they constrict. And next week, hypertension, I think is next week, you'll learn how to lower your blood pressure by eating more foods that have that produce nitric oxide. And you've learned about that tonight with the dark green leafies. But you'll also learn next week about the oils and how they constrict your arteries and raise your blood pressure. And they also slow your blood flow. So let's take a look at those. And as sort of a next step here. And we're gonna come over here. And it's number one American killer. And again, if you want to mute yourself, I guess I could try to do that, but it's harder for me to do it. Let's see if I can do it. Yeah, I can do it. Okay, good deal. Now we're going to play America's number one killer, heart disease. Let's take a look at it.
Representation of what happens when you eat high-fat meals. Watch this. This is a dramatic representation of what happens when you eat a high-fat meal, whether it's vegetable fat or animal fat. Initially, the blood cells, they flow by each other very smoothly. They actually repel each other, the cell membranes do, and you have this rapid, effective blood flow throughout the body. Then you eat the fat, vegetable or animal fat, goes through the gut into the bloodstream, coats the blood cells, and now they hit, stick, clumps, sludge, and now you have ineffective circulation. This affects the whole body. You feel sleepy and sluggish. People who have narrowed heart arteries, they get chest pain. This clumping and sludging causes the blood pressure to go up, and it continues, this sludging, for about 10 to 12 hours after you eat. And finally, after about 10 to 12 hours, the blood starts to break up, and we then have normal, effective circulation.
Boy, that was shocking. I'll bet my...
A fatty material called atherosclerosis.
Now, this is plaque formation in coronary arteries at coronary surgery when you have open heart surgery. So the patient's chest is cracked, and this is an artery of the heart, and they're pulling some plaque out of it. So take a look at this.
This is a beautiful example of what atherosclerosis looks like. There it is. And I'm going to just gently tug on this now.
I love it.
It's a little hard to pull. Dr. Coupot, if you could give a little pull too. We'll see if we can get this thing out.
We are just holding our breath so that you will finish the cake.
There it is. America's #1 killer right there before your eyes.
It's important to understand that the heart itself usually remains.
So I'm going to stop for a moment and make sure everybody is still sitting in their chair or standing and they haven't passed out by looking at that. Because to contemplate your arteries getting clogged up like that is not something that we find joy in sharing with you. But I've had a number of people tell me after they watched this video, that was what helped them make the decision that they were going to take the leap into changing what they chose to eat. Sometimes silence says more than words. Okay, so I have another video. Certainly motivating, someone said. Yeah, it is for a number of people. I want to share a survivor story with you, and then maybe one last video. So the survivor story is heart attack survivor thrives on plants, and it's Dave Willits from the Hope Project.
It was just a typical Friday afternoon. I was at work. I work at a manufacturing plant. And I'm walking down the aisle, and all of a sudden I just felt a tingly feeling throughout my body. And it like made me stop. And I just kind of like looked down at my body, and it's like, never felt that before, you know? But then I continued to walk and still felt just a little bit funny. So I get back to my office, and I sit down in my chair, and you know, I kind of kick back and try to assess what was going on, and that made me a little bit lightheaded, you know. But then I started to sweat a little bit, and that's just, it's not really like me. I don't sweat a whole lot unless I'm working out or something of that nature. So I picked up the phone and called our HR director, and I said, I'm not feeling too good. She says, well, do you want me to like call somebody or drive you somewhere? And I said, yeah, why don't you call 911? They got there within 5 minutes, and paramedics come in. They hooked up a 12 lead to me, and the paramedic looks at me, he says, it appears that you're having a heart attack. So prior to my heart attack, I always felt that I was a pretty healthy guy. I was 175 pounds at the time, and had just lost 40 pounds and had maintained that, and was working out 3 or 4 days a week and eating much better. So when I had my heart attack, it just kind of like totally threw me for a loop because I didn't understand it at all. I'm in the recovery room, and my son was there, and I looked at him and I said, "Hey, what's up?" He says, "You need 3 stents." I'm like, "Oh, cool. When am I going to get those?" He said, "They already put them in you." He said, "You flatlined 3 times. They had to shock you 11 times. They didn't think that you were going to make it."
It was me and my brother. We went to the hospital. I remember my brother was freaking out. My brother was like crying and like, "How are you guys so calm?" And like, the doctor had heard us talking about Willits, and he turned around really fast. He was like, "Willits?" Like, "Oh, he's in the cath lab. He just, we almost lost him." And so we walked to where he was at, the room he was at. He kind of realized how real it was.
That's when it just all started to kind of like click on what I had just experienced. I still hadn't put it all together, but I realized that what I felt was death. I felt what it was like to die. I felt the last, what was almost the last breath of my life, and an experience like that is everlasting. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about it, but it's also a wake-up call, and it was an opportunity for me, unlike many others that didn't get that opportunity to make a change, to want to not have to go through that experience again. Cleared out all the junk in my refrigerator, just threw it away, went across the street to the grocery store, picked up every leafy green that they sell. Of course, it's all labeled when it's on the counter and you pick it up, but when I got home, I had no idea what to do with it. I mean, I didn't even, there was no label. I didn't even know what it was anymore, so I couldn't even like Google it to see what I was supposed to do with it. But from that day on, it's been over 4.5 years now, I have not touched any animal or dairy product whatsoever, and I really don't intend to. A lot of people think that I'm extreme with what I do, and I get it. Maybe I am, but with what I experienced, I mean, that was an extreme thing to me, and so it was worth taking a chance. It's been 4.5 years now. I've never felt better. Feeling what it's like to die just gives you a total different perspective, and knowing that you've made some adjustments to hopefully prevent that from happening again is a peace that I wish everybody could experience.
And so the last video I want to play is how do we know that cholesterol causes heart disease? And then we'll see if there are any further questions. One last video.
It is well accepted that coronary atherosclerosis is a chronic progressive disease that begins early in life and slowly progresses over several decades before symptoms arise. However, the average age in cholesterol-lowering drug trials is 63, and therefore people had already been exposed to a lifetime of circulating LDL cholesterol. So no wonder pharmaceutical therapies typically reduce cardiovascular disease risk by only 20 to 30%. We know LDL, so-called bad cholesterol, plays a central role in the initiation, development, and progression of our #1 killer. Over 100 prospective studies involving more than 1 million people have demonstrated that those with higher LDL levels are at higher risk. It seems reasonable to assume that if lowering cholesterol later in life can help, then keeping LDL levels low early in life may prevent our arteries from getting clogged in the first place. But let's not just assume. It would be considered unethical to set up a controlled clinical trial in which young adults with elevated serum cholesterol levels were treated or not treated over their lifetime, just like you couldn't ethically set up a study in which half the kids are made to start smoking to see if smoking really does cause lung cancer. That's where observational studies come in. You can follow people who already smoke and compare their disease rates to those that don't. It's like 40 years ago when the president of the American Heart Association tried to argue that we should all stop smoking, even though there were no randomized controlled trials. Look, those who smoke have a higher risk of heart attack. The more we smoke, the higher the risk, and after we stop, our risk drops. The same can be said for high cholesterol. If you look at young men aged 18 through 39 and follow them for up to 34 years, cholesterol levels, even when you're young, predicts long-term risk of heart disease and death. Men in their 20s and 30s who have a total cholesterol even just under 200 have a substantially longer estimated life expectancy, around 4 to 9 years longer than those over 240. Evidence from observational studies, however, is vulnerable to so-called confounding factors. Eating a diet plant-based enough to lower cholesterol below average may add years to our lives regardless of what our cholesterol is. Ideally, we'd have a long-term randomized controlled trial, and nature may have actually set one up for us. Each of us, at conception, gets a random assortment of genes from our mother and our father, and some of those genes may affect our cholesterol levels. Just like there's rare genetic mutations that result in unusually high cholesterol, there are rare genetic mutations that lead to unusually low cholesterol, providing an ideal system to assess the consequences of low LDL cholesterol levels independent of confounding diet and lifestyle factors. Let me show you what I mean. About 1 in 40 African Americans have a mutation that drops their LDL cholesterol from up around 130 down towards more optimal levels. Now, this group didn't eat healthy to get there, it's just in their genes. More than half had high blood pressure, there were lots of smokers and diabetics, yet those with genetically low LDL levels still had a significant reduction in the incidence of coronary heart disease, even in the presence of all these other risk factors. How significant? How much less heart disease? How about 88% of heart disease gone? The astounding finding was that the heart disease risk in these individuals was reduced by more than 80%, whereas the same 20 to 40 point decrease in LDL from drugs only reduces risk like 30%. Makes sense, though, right? The folks with the mutation had low levels like that their whole life. They didn't just start taking some pill when they were 60 years old. The magnitude of the effect of long-term exposure to lower LDL cholesterol concentrations observed in each of these studies represents threefold greater reduction in the risk of heart disease compared to drug treatment started later in life. For you fellow research nerds out there, check out that p-value. You'd have to do like a quintillion studies to get that kind of result by chance. Therefore, a primary prevention strategy that promotes keeping LDL cholesterol levels as low as possible, beginning as early in life as possible, and sustaining those low levels of LDL throughout the whole of one's lifetime, has the potential to dramatically reduce the risk of coronary heart disease, and that's just what a healthy diet can do.
And that brings us back to Dr. Colgrove and pediatricians, and the pediatric group, starting early, starting plants early. The more plants, the less animal products, the better, starting in childhood. So with that, are there any questions? You don't have to be shy. You just need to unmute and say, hey, what about this?
Hey! Charlie, I don't have any questions.
because this is our second time. We watched this before, and we've learned each time. We're looking at each other, nodding our head and poking and saying we need to make an adjustment. But I just had some blood work done. I was running pre-diabetic before I started plant-based diet. I'm no longer a pre-diabetic. I'm clean. The numbers are excellent. I'm scheduled for some ultrasounds on the carotid arteries. The last time I had this one on the right side done, the numbers had improved. I had better blood flow. It opened up some. So I'm hoping that's going to be better even coming up. So, and I know physically, my blood pressures are dropping, consistently dropping. I haven't gone off any medications as yet, but I'm in close contact with my doctor, and he's aware of, the whole food plant-based diet, and we're working, just watching the numbers. But there's some other things that signs that indicate that I'm getting better blood flow consistently. I work and busy all day long and able to do that. At night I crash because I'm wore out, but that happens when you're 78, I guess. But
yeah,
but I'm busy all day long on my feet and going. So the whole food plant-based, we're about a year and 5 months out since we started. So I'm looking at those 32 months where the arteries open right up all the way in that study that you showed earlier in one of the videos.
Great.
So I know it takes time, but I've got time. I just got to keep working at it. And we're not always 100%. Our weight's down. Once in a while we cheat because we just want to. Our daughter had a little celebration, so we had a cake with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
It was great. I loved it. But we don't do that every day.
We'll wait till next year to do it again.
Yeah,
Okay.
once in a while there's treats.
How
But,
much weight have you lost?
Pardon me?
How much weight have you lost?
I've lost about 25 pounds.
I've lost about 35.
And Marilyn's lost about 35. I was ahead of her for a while, but all of a sudden she just raced past me. And
we didn't try to lose weight. We tried to get healthy. Weight was just the bonus point. We didn't try to lose weight.
Right.
The nicest thing is when my daughter bought me over a pair of jeans that were too tight for her and I could wear them. See?
That's great. We love that
and I
story.
didn't have to buy any new pants. I can now fit my son-in-law's pants. I just got a pair of Levi's from him that he couldn't wear anymore. So
well, we appreciate all your comments, and we're glad that your journey has been a good one. And I don't think you could do anything better. Now, there is another question in the room from Lynn, which is an important one. And I don't know, Scott, if you want to talk about this. Can you comment on taking statins if LDL still isn't under 100? Do you want to comment on that, or?
Yeah, so you're going to get additional benefit by taking a statin. You want to get, ideal numbers would be LDL under 100, and then heart attack proof levels would be under 70. So there's something to be said for taking statins. They do provide some protection, but it's only about 20 to 30%, and that's relative risk reduction. Whereas the absolute risk reduction is you have to have 100 people have to take a statin for 5 years to prevent, or 104 patients have to take a statin for 5 years to prevent 1 heart attack and 1 stroke. So that doesn't sound that great, but on a population scale, that's pretty huge. And so they do think about that. Every 104 people out there that taking a statin, you prevented 1 heart attack, 1 stroke. But for each individual person, that doesn't sound so great. But that's where we're saying, hey, if you lower your cholesterol and do with the whole food plant-based diet, it's treating all the different contributing factors to heart disease, the oxidative stress, the inflammation, the lowering the plaque, and all these types of things. And so that's why you can get an 80 to 100% risk reduction following a whole food plant-based diet and other healthy lifestyle behaviors, whereas you're only going to get, you know, that 1 out of 104 people to prevent a heart attack with a statin. So it's not, you know, statins are definitely a tool, and they have their place and their use, but it doesn't compare to what you would get, the benefits you get from a whole food plant-based diet, healthy lifestyle.
I've heard that there are a lot of side effects possible from statins.
Correct. So they can injure your liver, they can cause muscle pain, they increase your risk for diabetes, they increase your risk for Alzheimer's. So they have downsides, but you know, if somebody comes to me in the office and they're not willing to make any diet or lifestyle changes, then the benefit still probably outweighs the risk, depending on what the risk is.
About 8-9 years ago, 10 years ago? Anyway, my doctor was measuring my LDL, and he said, I'm putting you on statins. I said, I'd heard about these side effects. And that's when we went vegan.
We cold turkey, and with the help of our daughter. And Judd.
I went from 139 LDL to 89 in 6 months.
Great.
That's great.
I also lost some weight, not as much as I would like.
And the cholesterol went down?
Yeah, overall cholesterol. I do not recall the numbers.
And I was collateral damage. I wasn't planning to go vegan, but it's difficult to have 2 diets going on in the same household. So I was pre-diabetic too. I went vegan and I lost 35-40 pounds, and neither of us are pre-diabetic anymore. We've been normal. Yeah, so it was wonderful for both of us, and wonderful recipes from JJ and help along the way.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That really is helpful, particularly for the new people who are potentially confused and like, you know, is this for real? It's really good to hear stories from people, real stories.
It's real. It's 100% real. It's helped us tremendously.
Yeah, my doctor said, I don't know what you're doing, but keep it up.
Thank you for sharing that. Evie and Doug.
Hi, I had 2 questions. I spin to start with, and I'm starting to get on Whole Foods, and I've been losing some weight. And I wonder what you could consider that I may have problems regarding body fat percentage and BMI, what I should not get below.
So a BMI above 18.5 to 19 is what you want to maintain as an ideal. You can go online and calculate your BMI based upon your height and your weight. If you find that your body will generally adjust, and I haven't seen anybody who's lost too much weight as yet over the years that I've done this. But if for those people who are concerned, you can eat a few more of those higher calorie density foods like walnuts or maybe avocados, and just eat a few more beans, rice, oatmeal, whatever, more of the higher calorie density foods. And so some people can stuff yourself on the greens, trying to get enough nitric oxide, and then you're so full that you don't eat enough beans, rice, potatoes, and the higher calorie density foods.
Okay, that leads me to the second question regarding, I'm eating a lot of nuts and peanut butter and avocado, and what if I'm getting too much fat, if that fat is bad, if it gets above a certain amount?
Yeah, that's potentially a dilemma. So what is your BMI now? Do you know?
It's around 19.5, 20, something like that.
Then you're fine. So cut down on the peanut butter is what I'd recommend.
Okay.
You can eat a few peanuts, but the peanut butter gets absorbed more readily and whatever. So.
Okay, and what about body fat percentage? Is there any number that you're aware of?
Well, if you're a marathon runner or a ultra marathoner, you can go down to what, 3% body fat?
I have no
which I don't-
problem. Yeah, I'm at 15.
Yeah, so I don't think percentage of body fat, I've never used that to calculate anyone's health. How about you, Scott?
No. It's pretty much
Time
possible, for most people, it's impossible to get too low in body fat. So you want to maintain your muscle mass. Muscle mass is the harder thing to maintain when you're getting older. So that's where you get the resistance exercise in there, light weights and resistance to maintain your muscle mass. That's the more of the issue. And then it's just people that are, and it's obviously less than 2% of the population is even underweight. So it's just normally not a problem for most people, but yeah, there's a few cases where people get a little bit low on their BMI, and that's where you got to get those higher calorie density foods and get that resistance exercise going to maintain muscle mass. But body fat hasn't been an issue in my experience either.
I drink about 16 ounces of soy milk a day for protein. Is that a problem?
Probably okay.
16 ounces. Not sure what a serving is.
8 ounces. So
That's approaching 5 servings or maybe 6. I don't. Yeah, how much is the serving, do you think, Scott?
well, a cup is 8 ounces, so that's probably.
Oh, so a cup is a serving, I think.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
Yes.
So 16 ounces would be fine. 2 servings of soy, and then you could have up to 3 to 5 servings a day, according to Gregor, is safe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Anybody else? He turned off the microphone.
I would like to ask a different question, and it's going away a little bit away from this topic. And if you would rather defer it to another time, that's fine. But we were talking a little bit last week about osteoporosis, and over this last week, I listened to a doctor giving a talk, and he talked about using whole body vibration as a means of building bone mass. And I'm currently on Fosamax. I've been on it for quite a while. I need to be talking to my doctor about getting off of it, because my understanding is you shouldn't stay on it more than 5 years. But have either of you heard anything about using whole body vibration, where you get on a platform that vibrates, and then you do some some squats or different exercises, and that's supposed to build muscle or bone mass?
I haven't heard anything like that. I've not seen any article that demonstrates benefit. Weight-bearing exercises are important. Using resistance weights, perhaps wearing a vest that has extra weight where you walk around in it could be weight-bearing. Walking faster than you're used to walking may be considered weight-bearing. But that's the one thing that tends to be missing for most people who are losing bone mass. The other thing is the diet. Eating less animal products and eating plant-based is beneficial, and making sure you have an adequate level of vitamin D, and making sure you're getting enough greens and beans for a reasonable calcium intake of somewhere for sure above 400, but maybe 600 might be a better range to be thinking about. So calcium, vitamin D, the exercise component is the one that I think most people fall short in. And that vibration, in my mind, doesn't seem to be weight bearing. What do you think, Scott?
yeah, I mean, I hadn't heard of it either, but I guess I get the concept. I don't know if they haven't seen any articles like you or any studies on it necessarily, but I kind of get the concept, kind of putting stress on the bones to stimulate bone density. But yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. I was just curious if you had heard anything about it. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing it up.
It's really interesting the amount of emphasis we've placed on osteoporosis. When I graduated from medical school almost 50 years ago, we really never even talked about osteoporosis, and it's become kind of a big thing, probably because of the American diet, or maybe because of the DEXA scan machines, and the drug companies that distributed them so they could sell their blockbuster drug Fosamax. They decided that everybody has this bone thinning. But frankly, in my experience, I didn't see people dying like flies because of their bones breaking. People do get fractured hips. It's usually in nursing home people or people who are very sedentary or not very active at all. So I wonder if we're not doing a little doctor mongering, is what Dr. McDougall calls it, to have patients keep coming back and feeding them the drug, the Fosamax, which, you know, I don't know whether it's really preventing what they want to be preventing. I'm not convinced of that. Any thoughts, Scott?
Yeah, same here. I mean, most of the trials that were done were on nursing home patients, and so it did decrease fracture risk in nursing home patients. But you know, they're sedentary. They're not getting out in the sunshine. They're, you know, it's kind of the easy, kind of like the low hanging fruit, so to speak, as far as doing drug trials. But if you're somebody that's you know, eating a relatively healthy diet, not smoking, getting out in the sunshine, doing weight bearing exercise, I don't know, you know, how much benefit someone's really going to get from those drugs. I mean, yeah, you can increase bone mineral density, but what the studies haven't really panned out very convincingly to actually reduce fracture risk in the general population. So it's definitely increases bone density, which you would think theoretically would reduce fracture risk, but the studies haven't been too conclusive on reducing the fracture risk other than in the more sedentary nursing home patients. So yeah, the jury's kind of out.
And I saw one study that showed that you may increase the bone density, but the structure of that density is weaker than the normal amount, and it may lead to increased fracture.
Yeah, it was called micro cracks. It put
so
the bisphosphonates put micro cracks in the bone texture, and the thought was being that it was monkeying too much stimulation of bone remodeling. It had an effect on bone remodeling, and so you know it's a balance of osteoclasts and osteoblasts, and it kind of throws the balance off and causes these micro cracks. Even though, so the bone strength was actually worse, even though their density went up. So kind of an interesting. Yeah, I read that study as well.
I have a comment.
Yes, Beth, you're up late.
Yes, I am. My understanding is that this is what I've heard from a lot of the longtime vegan doctors, like that if you have too much protein, it leaches calcium from your bones. That's how I've heard it explained. So if Americans overall are having too much protein, which in general they are, then that's going to leach calcium from their bones. And so there would be more osteoporosis.
Yeah, you make a good point. And actually, Gregor has a video on that. And I think the loss is from the muscle as opposed to bone. We used to think it was from the bone, but it gets spilled out from the muscles, I think, from one of the videos.
Yeah, it's the protein. The excess protein causes an acidic state, which decreases muscle mass. And then the decreased muscle mass makes for less stress on the bones, because if you lose muscle mass, you lose bone strength. And so it's actually has more to do with that, because when people eat more, when they actually eat more protein, they absorb more calcium. So the balance is correct. And so, but still overall, it's an acidic, you know, animal protein is acidic, and it's not a good state for our body to be in. And yeah, we'll talk about that more in depth when we do the osteoporosis class in the future here.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Beth. Nancy.
Oh, well, I was just going to be a listener tonight, but hearing you know that I'm doing a lot of research about the bone thing, and I would not want to try a drug solution, and you doubled my conviction on that, talking about how it actually works. But I just jumped in to say that in doing this research, I have something that Evie might want to look at. There is some fabulous research studies, very well founded, that you're going to laugh, the effect of prunes on bone health. is extraordinarily strong in ways that are well, mysterious to me, but not to the scientists. So if Evie wants to kind of go on her own and find some of that, I don't have it right to hand, but that is something I found even more than other foods, and a nice food-based. That the maximum benefit was gained if you ate 10 prunes a day, but even 5 prunes a day would be helpful. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Nancy. And I read that study this last week, and the only thing that tends to kind of pull me back from being completely supportive, even though I do eat those 5 prunes every day, 4 or 5, is that it was actually funded by the Prune Association.
Yes.
And so, you know,
Yes.
you wonder, has there been some influence to the investigators? Did they come up with something?
I thought about that, and I thought, but maybe they're the only source in the world that would have cared to fund a prune research. I don't know, but
Good
anyway.
point. Nonetheless, prunes are healthy. They have good fiber, and you're not going to harm yourself by 5 prunes.
It's a low risk strategy for sure.
And it was good to read that you could preserve your bone function. So thank you for bringing that up and sharing that.
Thanks.
Okay, everyone. Unless Scott, if you have something else, we've really enjoyed this session with all of you. Nice to have the new people hop on board and participate. We're thrilled. We look forward to being with you next week. It's going to be what, hypertension?
Yep. So that's kind of a continuous, it's a good one to do on the back of this one, because it's all very related. So
very good. Okay, everyone. Until the next time.
See everybody. We'll see you in the movies.
Very good.
Oh, hey, what about that walk? I hadn't heard about that walk before. What is that?
yeah, on the Saturday the 21st, it's in my class newsletter, and then you can also go on to Eugene Plant-Based Providers website and see the details of it there on the upcoming events also. So yeah, we hope to have you out there on Saturday the 21st at 2 o'clock, Skinner's Butte Park.
Thanks. And I'm totally lost on nitrous oxide thing. Confusing. It's so